So over the weekend, I was able to buy this brand new Gibson 59 reissue. And in this video, I want to take you through it a little bit, give my thoughts on it, a bit of a review, and some playing demonstration to show the tone. So the first thing I wanted to talk about was really, the big thing with the Gibson reissues, the custom shop models, is the price. Gibson aren't famous for being the cheapest of guitars anyway. Just their regular, it's going to cost you four figures to get the cheapest Gibson going. If you were to get, say, the Les Paul Tribute, you're looking around £1,000, probably similar in dollars. So they're not known as budget guitars, and then by the time you get to Les Paul standards, you're looking at a couple of thousands, and then you've got the custom models, and then you get the custom shop, which are much more expensive again, certainly new. One point to consider on the pricing is you can get really good deals used. The cost of a used custom shop model, you don't necessarily pay a lot more than you would for a new standard. Now, obviously you've got the consideration there of one's new and one's used, and maybe that's a factor for you, but you can get pretty good deals on it where it doesn't cost you much more money. For example, in this case, under the chair here is an older 58 reissue. Now I'm going to be selling that one as part of the funding plan for this one, but it's a 2011 that I bought in 2020, and it cost me a few £100 more than a standard would cost me. The thing about the reissues is they're generally well taken care of because they're expensive. People see them as something of an investment, not necessarily an investment in the sense that it's there to generate a massive return on that, to make money, but they're expensive. People tend to take good care of them, knowing that you can probably get most of your money back out of it if you decide to sell in the future. So you're not necessarily looking at buying a beat up guitar and still spending more money for the privilege of it. So if you're looking at the custom shop models and you're taking it back at the sticker price, you don't be afraid of looking at the second-hand market. There are good deals to be had. So that said, the price of these, the big question is, are they worth it? And it's a difficult question to answer because really what you're talking about with these are incremental improvements over the standard model. Like I said, a Gibson standard, a Les Paul standard, it's not the cheapest guitar, and in many ways it is a premium guitar. It's a good quality. I know there have been talks about certain QC issues with Gibson, and that's not been my experience at all. First things first, every time I've played a Gibson, I've been happy with it. Even the ones I didn't buy, I played them in the shop. I like to play guitars if I encounter a good store, and I haven't had the experience that some people talk about. That's not to say that those experiences are false. I completely believe them. I just don't think it's the case that 9 out of 10 of them are going to be bad guitars. So you're not gonna buy a good standard and think you've got a bad guitar, is what I'm trying to say. So when you then say, are these worth roughly 3 times the price, it's a personal decision. So for me, why did I want this one, especially already having the R8? So for me, one, I've been playing guitar for a long time. Les Pauls are my favorite guitars, and I wanted the kind of best version of it that Gibson make is kind of it for me. And secondary to that was I've amassed a collection of 14 guitars. A couple of weeks ago I had 14, and I came to the conclusion, I intentionally built that collection over a number of years. I love guitars, even just having them around. I like looking at them as pieces of art in their own right, I guess. So I intentionally bought them, and I intentionally bought ones that did different things. They filled different roles, but then once you've got that many guitars, the thing that people don't really talk about so much is you have to look after them. So suddenly you're buying new strings for 14 guitars. If you're paying a guitar tech to do maintenance for you, fret dressing, fret leveling, that's money, you know, that you're giving them more money to work on more guitars. And then you've just got general maintenance, like adjusting the action, checking the truss rods, do they need adjusting with certainly with seasonal fluctuations and temperature changes. So personally, I do things like that myself, so that keeps the cost down. But then there's the time. At the time, you either spend the money or you spend the time. You have to do one or the other. So having 14 guitars, that was the problem. And then I also came to the conclusion that you end up playing pretty much the same ones over and over again. So for me, I have guitars around the house. In my office here, I've got 4 on the wall, 1 under the chair, 1 next to my desk over there. Then I've got a handful more downstairs. So wherever I am, I can kind of pick up a guitar. But you go for the same ones. So if I want to play acoustic, I've got a PRS P20, which is a small body parlor acoustic, which I find really good for just if I'm learning something new. The smaller body's nice, rather than going for the big dreadnought all the time. And then equally, you know, in here, I go for the same electric. So I realised I don't really need all these guitars because I'm going for the same ones. And on that basis, why don't I look at reducing the size of the collection and putting some of the money into one really nice guitar? Hence this. So the question of, is it worth it? So it's an incremental thing. You're not going to pick these guitars up, and it doesn't necessarily feel 3 times better, but it does feel better. And this is the rub with it. There's an argument to be made that you don't get what you pay for, but the counter to that argument is you pay for what you get. Okay, so what I mean by that is if this is the best that Gibson makes, this is what they charge for it. Okay, so on that basis, what I mean is it is better. It feels better. So the first thing you notice with these, and obviously unfortunately I can't pass this through the camera, it's light. Okay, so the R9s, the reissues in general, but the R9s in particular, they get the lighter mahogany. Doesn't necessarily mean they'll be the lighter guitar overall, because the R9s in particular, yeah, they get the lovely flame top. So that maple might have more weight to it. So overall, the total weight of the guitar might be more or less. You know, they're not massively consistent there. But the mahogany, they're chosen for the light mahogany. So this particular guitar is 8.4 pounds. I asked them to weigh it in the store before I bought it, and it's hands down the lightest guitar the lightest Les Paul that I've ever held, much less owned. The R8 under here, again, that's 12 years old. Things have changed over that time, but that weighs over 9 pounds. So on paper, that's only 1 pound, but you can feel that pound. It feels significant. And again, my standard is also slightly heavier than this. So one thing you get if you're at the custom shops is you're almost certainly going to get a lighter Les Paul. There will be variations there. There will be some reissues that are way more than a standard, or rather there might be a standard that just happens to be lighter. But on the whole, you're likely to find that they're a lighter guitar. So even though we're talking about a difference of £1 pound in weight and maybe a few millimeters smaller on the neck, holding this guitar standing up with the strap to it, and it's over your shoulders, somehow it feels more ergonomic than my standard, and certainly than the R8, which is the R8 has a big baseball bat neck, and it's slightly heavier, so it feels heavier and it feels like a lump of wood, whereas this somehow feels more ergonomic, even though it's the exact same design, it's the same body size, it's the same neck length. But what I'm really saying is those small differences do seem to matter to playability and comfort. So that's one thing that you get. Then it looks the same, but it's better. Okay, so the tuners, I'll show you the headstock on this. It looks exactly the same as the standard, you know, with the tulip tuners and all the rest of it. But evidently they're not exactly the same, and the tuners are rock solid. I changed the strings on this 2 days ago. The first thing I do when I get a new guitar home is I change the strings on it. and it hasn't gone out of tune since. You know, normally when you change strings, it can take a little bit of settling in, and it hasn't. They've just been rock solid. I've played with a lot of bends. I've been breaking it in. I haven't wanted to put it down because it's just such a nice guitar to play, and it's stayed in tune. So if you find that that's an irritant for you or an irritation for you, I'm not sure how to phrase that. They're just better there. One thing that the reissues do differently than the new models is the bridge. So with the bridges on here, they're screwed directly into the body. I don't know if you can see that very well, but the bridge itself screws into the body, or rather it's on this plate that goes right into the body, whereas on the standard it's mounted differently. So that may or may not be a consideration for you. I probably don't have the strongest feelings on it, but there are one or two, you know, at first glance they look identical, but there are a few things that are slightly different, and they lead to an overall better product. The quality control in it, I mean, I've inspected this guitar with a fine tooth comb, so to speak, and it's just it's flawless. It's the only word I can use to describe it. It's flawless. So being a reissued custom shop, the back is one piece of mahogany. So the standards are typically one or two, depending on what's available. Normally two, but occasionally one. So it's one piece. Some people will tell you that makes a difference with the resonance. I just know that it looks great. There's something to be said, I think, when you're looking at the kind of money that these cost. There's something just to be said for the sheer beauty of them. Certainly for me, anyway. So again, you know, that translates everywhere. The grain on the back, on the neck, even on the edge. I don't know how well it shows, but there's just these lovely kind of patterns in the grain. So yeah, it helps to have something nice to look at, I guess. And then the top is just ridiculous. So you've got this lovely flame on it. Again, the R9s, you will get some R8s with the flame, but generally speaking, the 8s get more of a plain top and the 9s get more of a flame. And then on here too, we've got not only the flame, but the more swirl patterns that you get in the wood. So there's a nice combination on this particular model, which I haven't seen a lot of. So whether they're worth the money, as I said, it's hard to say. It's a very personal thing. But what I will say is you get a guitar that's undeniably better. So every time I play a Les Paul standard or Gibson, you know, almost any Gibson, but I'm a Les Paul person, so I keep going back to that. I've enjoyed playing them. I find them, you know, comfortable to play. I'm very at home with the Les Paul. And as I said before, you know, dimensionally, this is all exactly the same. But it's just a better version of it. Now, does that make me a better player? Well, yes and no. On the one hand, obviously, it doesn't make me a more knowledgeable player. It doesn't automatically level up what I can do. But it makes me a better player in the sense that it's kind of hard to explain, but it's because it's nicer to play. I feel like my playing is better. Okay, so it doesn't make me a better player, but it brings out the best version of me. And then on top of that, because it's so nice and you don't want to put it down, you play more, and that does make you a better player. You know, I've always found, for me personally, there's nothing worse than having a guitar that's not enjoyable to play, and that is always the problem. Certainly for beginners, it's the biggest problem for beginners, because the guitars are difficult enough to learn on as it is. It's an instrument that I like to say fights back. When you're brand new, your wrist hurts, your fingers hurt, you've got the strings kind of giving you pain, and that's all on top of just the difficulty of learning. You know, trying to get the chords under your fingers, trying to stretch from one fret to the next. It's not the easiest instrument to learn at the best of times. So then if you compound that by having a guitar that's unpleasant, the action's too high, the strings are too thick, it sounds terrible, it's, you know, it really fights back, you're not going to be the best player. That guitar's not going to let you be the best. It's not going to present the best of you, but it's also probably not going to make you want to pick it up in the first place. So then you go longer without playing, and those are the things that affect your playing. So when people say don't spend the money on an expensive guitar, they don't make you a better player, you know, that's a fact. That is true. Of course it's true. But I do think the caveat to that, the nuance to that, is they can enhance your playing. You know, they can make you sound better through your current capabilities, but they can also accelerate your development because you enjoy playing them so much. That, I think, is the important consideration here. So I mentioned as well that it's a Les Paul but better. So how noticeable are the differences? I'm going to say they're pretty noticeable. Okay, so I went into the shop. As I said, I funded this by getting rid of, or planning to get rid of, a couple of other guitars. Which meant my criteria, when I went shopping, my criteria was very simple. I wanted a guitar that could take the role of 3 other guitars. Those 3 guitars are a Telecaster, so you know, that real bright, snappy sound. My R8, which is a Les Paul, but it's a very mid-focused sound, very rich sound. And a PRS. You can't see it, but I've got a PRS Custom 24 up there, which is probably the single most versatile guitar that I've ever had. The PRS, that particular PRS, I can't speak for all of them, it's 2 humbuckers like the Les Paul, but there's a 5-way selector switch, so you get neck, middle, bridge position, and then the other 2 are variations of coil splits. So that guitar, if you want it to, can do pretty much everything. You can get a telly twang out of it, you can get that Strat squawk out of it, plus the harmonically rich pickup, humbucker pickup sound, that make it, if you're in a cover band and you want one guitar, the PRS is probably what you would go for. So I needed a guitar, you know, that could fill all those roles, because again, what I found, I'm not really playing all 3 of them all the time, and I don't need a guitar that can take the exact role of all of them, but something that sat roughly in the middle of them, something that could take a bit of each. And that meant needing a guitar that could do the Les Paul thing, that rich, creamy, certainly on the neck pickup, that rich, creamy sound, but also something really top end, you know, good focus in the top end. So what I found with the 9s in particular, the 59s in particular, custom, these are stock pickups. These are Gibson's custom buckers, which have, you know, as always, they've as always in the reissues, I should say, they've tried to voice them to be close to the pickups in the original bursts, the late 50s, 1960 models. The difference, and that's true of the burst buckers in the R8, the difference I found with the custom buckers is the articulation is very good. Very good note separation and articulation and clarity, which again isn't something that the Les Paul has always been renowned for. But it is something that is very present on the PRS. It is something that's said of the Telecaster. So straight away, if I'm going to buy a new Les Paul to replace those guitars, I need something that can tick that box. The challenge is it also been able to tick the box of the Les Paul thing, which is a much warmer, creamier, rich sound. So I went shopping with that in mind. Can I find this guitar? If I can't find this guitar, I'll keep what I've got. So this is a long answer to the question, I know, but the question of how noticeable are the differences, that was the criteria that I had. Okay, so I went into the shop, I pick it up, and the first thing I think is, well, these are light. They're light. As I said, it's not even £8.5. It's just... Now, I couldn't tell you with any certainty that has an impact on tone. It certainly has an impact on comfort, but I couldn't say it has an impact on tone. But what I can tell you is that when I plug it in and went for the top end, it's there more than my other Les Pauls or other Les Pauls that I played. And then you also immediately notice that the neck's a bit more comfortable. Which again, that's one of the first things you notice is just, okay, that's the best neck. You cycle through the pickups and the knobs and you think, yeah, that's got certain tones that I can't otherwise access from my Les Pauls. One of the reasons I was tempted to part with the R8 was that really mid-focus thing that it excels at. It's got that's its voice that my other guitars don't do, but at the same time it's kind of all it does. Whereas this guitar is much more versatile, there's more going on with it. So you notice how it feels, you notice how it plays, you notice how it sounds, and then you also notice that it stays in tune. I've heard people say that you couldn't get through a full set with a Les Paul without having to tune it. Now, personally, that's not really been my experience. My band would have 4-hour rehearsals, and I would not really. You do a little, slight adjustments to the tuning, but it never was problematically out of tune. But that's also true of gigs. I never had a big problem with it. But there is a difference between it not really going out of tune and it not at all going out of tune. And I did notice in the shop, I was there for 4 hours on 2 consecutive weekends. I tune it, you take it off the wall, they're not in tune, of course, and you tune it up in the shop, and it's still in tune when you put it down, despite everything that you're putting it through. So those are the differences that you notice, right? You buy a new guitar and you normally think, okay, I'll adjust this, I'll tweak this, and I'll change that. And then with this guitar, I was thinking, I really truly don't need to do anything. Out of the box, there's nothing I need to. I'm going to have my tech look at it just to make sure that his professional opinion is likewise. But for me as the player, there's nothing I feel the need to tweak. It is just perfect. So that doesn't again necessarily mean that it's worth 3 times the price. Certainly you could buy a cheaper model, put all the upgrades in it that you want, and still have change in your pocket. I totally understand that. So for me, again, the acquiring of this guitar came from basically I'm trading. So I've got the value of the guitar currently in multiple guitars I'm selling and putting into this. So if I was going to the shop to buy this strictly in cash, that is a very different proposition. And I do think there are very, very there are different things you could do with that money, depending on your situation in life. But that's a family vacation, that's good. You could put that into business. You could do things for your kids with it. You could buy a car with it. It's not a small amount of money, and I do think that is everyone has to answer for themselves what that money means to them. So for me, having the money already spent on other guitars, and I'm in a position to sell those and essentially trade for this one, makes it a much easier decision. But if I had to save for it and pay in cash, I don't know. Because the thing is, these are pure luxury items. They're not guitars that many professional musicians who make their living playing guitar don't own guitars of this value. So it's not true to say you need a custom shop to get the job done. You don't. It's just, you don't. Equally, people who drive expensive cars, you don't have to be a professional driver to enjoy driving a Bentley or even a lower luxury model like something like a Mercedes or whatever. You don't have to stay in the budget car range. Sometimes you spend the money because you enjoy it, or it's just what you're looking for. So I think it's important to be honest with yourself when you're looking at these guitars. Why am I looking to spend that money? I don't think there's anything wrong with saying because I want it, but I don't think we should lie to ourselves to say, well, I need it for this, and this, because odds are you probably don't. So I can say I need this because in my current situation, this helps me downsize my collection. And that is true. But I could equally say it's not really a need. You know, I don't need it to make a living. I don't need it because no other guitar can get the job done. There's not really any harm in having 2 guitars instead of 1. So for me, this helps me fulfill a desire to downsize my collection while still retaining access to all of these tones and the nice guitar. So is it worth it? That's up to you to decide. But I would say, don't dismiss them. Don't dismiss them just because of the price tag. I think there's a real tendency to say that's expensive, therefore it's overpriced. And I'm not a particular fan of that view. Because it's also important to remember, you know, especially with guitars. I said at the beginning of this video that Gibsons aren't the cheapest. Well, part of the reason they're not the cheapest is because if it says Gibson on the headstock, it's made in the USA. So it's very important, I think, when you're comparing the cost of guitar A with guitar B to factor in just the costs of making that guitar. You can't compare a Gibson with even an Epiphone, but certainly cheaper brands, you know, the PRS SE models, some of the Ibanez models, some of the Mexican Fenders, they're a lot cheaper because the company made it an intentional choice to go overseas for the sole reason that it's cheaper for labour and probably overheads too, you know, warehouses, factories, machinery, all that stuff, it's cheaper. And that all goes into the price you pay. So I think that there's a tendency for some people to think that's a guitar, therefore they're the same, and that one's more expensive, so it's overpriced. You know, they're not necessarily equal. So if you're buying a Gibson, you are paying American wages. You're paying American rents or mortgage rates on the buildings. You're paying American taxes. You're paying the American benefits for those workers. Now, to be clear, I'm not saying that you should buy American instead of going overseas. I know for some people that's important, other people it's not important. I'm not sharing my opinion on that. I'm just saying bear in mind that that goes into the price. Okay, it doesn't necessarily, again, just because something is made in the US or it's made in the West, doesn't necessarily mean it's a better product, but that's part of the reason for the price. So then you look into custom shop models. As I said, they're using lighter mahogany. That's probably harder to come by. It may have its own costs associated with it. The fact it's a one piece of mahogany, instead of being able to cut 2 together, that probably increases waste because they have to find a size big enough that's usable, that meets the weight requirements and all the rest of it. The parts will be a little bit different, may have a bit more price involved in them. They're not producing as many, so that means they haven't got the volume of production that you have in the standard, you know, the USA production line, the Gibson USA production line. They have a higher volume, which means they can sell more units, generate more profit to pay the workers. With the custom shop producing fewer guitars, means they have to sell at a higher price point to pay the workers to cover the running costs. On top of the fact they're probably slightly more expensive to produce. I don't know the real numbers. Like I said, I would imagine things like lighter mahogany come at a higher cost. There's probably more waste involved. So all those little things, we're probably talking a bunch of little things adding up. So that's another reason for the cost. And then it's also very true that Gibson doesn't want to sell as many of these as a Les Paul standard, an SG standard, you know, all those other models, because then realistically, this is a luxury item. And it's, you know, if you go and look at, say, a brand like Louis Vuitton or Gucci, you know, those handbags and purses and wallets, they don't cost them that much money to make. But part of the branding is the cost, right? You create that desire, that sense of exclusivity. Price is a demand lever. So these guitars right here are priced at a point where they're inaccessible to a lot of people, which reduces the demand on them. So they don't sell as many, so it feels exclusive. But they're also priced at a point where they sell enough of them. They haven't got huge, the Gibson custom shop factory isn't as big as they haven't got as many people working on these because they have such a lower output, which means if they suddenly got orders for twice as many, they're going to hit problems. They couldn't fulfill those orders, they're going to disappoint people. So demand, using price as a demand lever helps you find that sweet spot where you're selling enough to cover all the costs and make whatever profit you want to make, but it's also high enough that you're not getting inundated with orders and the product stays exclusive. So yeah, you have to bear that in mind too. That might turn some people off. I don't want to contribute to this exclusivity. Personally, I don't have a big opinion of it. Like I said, my view with this was, I love Les Pauls. I've played Les Pauls for a long time. They're my favourite guitars and I want to have the best one I can have. And if I'm able to find one that replaces a few other guitars, I can downsize my collection. So that's what this guitar does. And it doesn't hurt that it looks great. Hang it on the wall and it's nice to look at. That's great. So I've rambled quite a lot about the guitar. I think it's time to plug it in and play it. But quickly on the model, this is a VOS, so it's not a Murphy Lab. It hasn't been aged. The VOS models do have, you can probably see on the screws here that there's a little bit of kind of what looks like rust. That's pretty much it. And then it looks glossier than they used to. This is a VOS model, so in places you can see a kind of haze on it. But that's it. So that's the extent of the aging. The hardware's slightly tarnished. That's roughly it. Whereas the Murphys are they're made to look already cracked and like they're already 20, 30, 50 years old. That all said, let's move on. So it's the same as a normal Les Paul. Mahogany, maple cap, 22 fret, rosewood. The inlays are a different material to normal, but they look a bit different, but nothing that you'd otherwise notice. The truss rod cover on the custom shop doesn't say anything. It doesn't say, normally that would say standard or custom or studio or whatever, but this doesn't say anything because it's how it was back in the day when these rolled off the factory. The custom, so they do have this, which says Gibson. It says Gibson Custom, handcrafted in Nashville, Tennessee. But one nice thing is in the case, they also include just a plain black one, so you can replace that if you want to, and it look like a everyday Les Paul. Otherwise, that's about it, I think. Indian rosewood board. You can't really get Brazilian anymore. I'm not too concerned about that myself. So let's run it through and try some tones. So it's just going through my Boss Katana on 0.5 watts because it gets very loud. We're on the crunch channel. Gain just about turned off because I'm using a tube screamer instead. That's very low. It's not massive gain. Channel volume about 2 o'clock, bass about 10 o'clock, middle about 10 o'clock, treble about 9 o'clock, a small amount of tube screamer, and that's it. So let's go through, see what it can do. So we'll start on the neck pickup. My main consideration, and this is something for the vintage bursts, the original Les Pauls nowadays have a reputation of being quite muddy, boomy, bassy guitars, filling in a lot of the low end. But they used to be called tellies on steroids. And that was kind of the sound I was going for. Something that even on the neck pickup, it's articulate, it's crisp. And then basically using the pickup selector to what I'd say, going through the gears. So let's start on the neck pickup. I wanted something creamy and full, but equally rich, you know, articulate. So we'll just do some chords. I'm going to do everything at 10, and then we'll pull back on the knobs and show some of the versatility that it's got. So this is everything on 10. If we take the volume back to about 8 or 9, there's an instant just removal of that real, the lowest frequencies there. So you can tell it's warm. I mean, this is the tone on 10. So, you know, the classic famous Les Paul woman tone has the tone rolled back. I'm going to put it on 0 just to go to the extreme. It's beautiful, right? It just cleans up significantly. We'll slowly introduce this back in. So that is volume on 8, 7.5, tone on 2, but it's there's a it's not sparkle, but it's crisp. That is not normally the sound you would get from a Les Paul with the tone way back on the neck pickup. It's introduce a bit more. Let's take it up to 4. Playing will be quite repetitive in this video, by the way. I always find when I'm demoing something, I like to play the same couple of things so I can hear how the same thing sounds. I know what I mean, hopefully you know what I mean. But you can tell, taking that up to 4.5, 5, 4.5, there's a brightness. So I'm not saying it sounds like a telly, certainly not on the neck pickup, certainly with the tone halfway down. But hopefully you can see what I mean when I said it's closing in on that territory where you think, I don't, you know, for me personally, I don't need all the guitars to do all the, in order to be able to do all the things. You know, so I said the PRS is the most versatile guitar. That's probably true. This does give it a run for its money, but I don't use most of the features on that guitar. I don't use positions 2 and 4 on the 5-way selector switch, so why have it just because it can do it if I'm not using it? So let's take this up to 7 on the tone. Volume is still at 7.5. I don't know how well this is going to play in the recording, but I found there's a lovely finger picking tone. 8 on the volume, 6 on the tone. You can just hear a little whisper of the low end. It's almost like a little bass crunch. It's very subtle, and it may only be something you can hear in the room. There's just a hint of a quack, and again, I hadn't found that on the R8, and I hadn't found it on my standard. So let's take this back to 5. You can hear the snap. That's the word I was looking for earlier. There's a snap to the playing. Of course, I'm on 0.5 watts here. If you turn it up, you'd have to do some adjusting. But bear in mind that I've got tube screamer on a little bit. It's not on high, of course. But I've not touched the amp. All the different sounds I'm producing now and will produce are just from changing the dials on the guitar. You know, I think if you start messing with pedals and amp settings to talk about a guitar's versatility, I think that's you know, of course you can get any guitar to do a lot of things. Personally, I'm not a big pedal guy. I use pedals to accentuate rather than create the sound. That's just me personally. I like the sound of more of a natural sound. That's why I prefer low output pickups as well. I prefer to get gain from the amp and sometimes pedals. So what I'm trying to demonstrate in this video is the versatility of the guitar itself, not what pedals can do to it. So we're on 5 and now 5. It's nice and clean. Let's leave the volume on 5, go up to 10. Warmer, right? 0. There's almost an acoustic thing going on there when you put that on 0. Right, so let's have a look at middle. I love middle so much, and this is one of the reasons I love Les Pauls and why I find almost anything else is a compromise. Having 2 volume and 2 tone in the middle position lets you do so much. So the PRS behind me, like I said, is very versatile, but I think the one downfall for it is it's got 1 master volume and 1 master tone. Now I know some people love that, and I like it. I do like the simplicity of it. But when you're in the middle position, I can't help but feel that's a limitation. You don't have to control. In the middle position on a Les Paul, I can completely remove 1 pickup. So let's just put this on 1 and this one on 10. So you remove almost all of the presence of that neck pickup. Or I can do the other way and just slowly introduce it back in. But I'm going to go through this now. So 10 and 10, 10 on everything. Take this back to 7. It's just, again, I don't know how well that's been picked up, but on a 0.5 watt amp, that's a glorious, just pure rock sound. Take it back a bit more. Let's put them both to 5. It's cleaned up significantly. Put a bit more of the neck back in, give it a bit more grunt. So again, where I like it in the middle, there's, like I said, that clean. Lovely for finger picking. Take it back a bit more. And that's before adjusting the tones. So I'm not going to spend too long labouring the point of this. And onto the bridge. Just roll off the top of the volume. So you got kind of a Paradise City sound there. Bit more. Take some tone back. Again, nice and clean. And of course, the other thing you can do with the Les Paul, and this comes back to what I said before about having dedicated tone and volume for each pickup. Put that bridge, everything on 10. Neck, I can have, let's say, cleaner. So this is, say, you know, you're doing your nice, gentle kind of chorus, verse playing. Comes to the chorus. So again, you know, so I'm not a big pedal fan, and certainly not just for turning the overdrive on and off. I think certainly with the Les Paul, that's something I like to control with the guitar anyway. So coming back to the question at the beginning, are they worth it? Again, one of the things, and this is what I look for, just my preference as a player, I look for what can the guitar do for me, right? Does the guitar naturally cover the sounds I want? Yes, okay, well to me that's worth a little bit more of a premium. I also just, some people like to tinker, right? I'm going to buy a guitar, I'm going to change the pickups, I'm going to change the wiring harness, I'm going to do this, that and the other. And that's not what appeals to me, really. I've changed pickups in one guitar, the BC Rich Mockingbird right here, you can see the strap for it. And the stock pickups in that were horrendous. It was like someone had thrown a very heavy blanket over the amp. So I put some Seymour Duncans in it. Every other guitar is stock. Every guitar I've sold has been stock. So if you want a guitar that you know you want to tinker with, then you know, that gives you many more options, I guess. So when you're going guitar amp with little in between, or with a preference for just the guitar being good enough naturally to kind of do all these things, then that I think makes you a little bit more discerning, or it can do, depends what you're trying to play. And then equally, I'm probably, you know, I could just be talking bollocks here. Like I said before, you don't need this guitar, you don't need to spend this kind of money to get certainly close. You know, like I said, this is, for me, is it worth it? For me, the answer is yes, because what I'm really paying for this guitar is, am I happy to lose my Tele, my 58 reissue and my PRS in order to have this? The answer for that is an easy yes. If someone's going to reach into my bank account and take £6,000, which I don't know what the exchange rate is, but I guess that's somewhere around 7,000 to 8,000 American dollars, I guess. Like I said earlier, that's a very, very different proposition. I don't know. But as I said, everyone has to answer the question for themselves. But what I do know is when I went to the shop and played it, all of them, they're very, gives to their credit, Gibson's very consistent, certainly with the custom shop. All of them were comfortably the best guitars I've ever played, which means you can't really pick a wrong one, but that also makes the decision harder. Part of the reason I was there 2 consecutive weekends for 4 hours each, 3 or 4 hours each, was because you've got to choose one guitar from a handful of the best guitars you've ever played. But eventually I whittled it down, and then when you pick the one, you know that that's the lifetime guitar. So then the money question opens up to, well, okay, that's a lot of money for one guitar, undeniably. But is it cheaper than me buying 6 to 8 guitars over a period of years? Yeah, it probably is cheaper than that. And I've lost money buying cheaper guitars that I then sold. I took a loss. I just sold my Telecaster. I took a loss on that. I'll probably break even on the other 2. That's a nice benefit too of having more premium guitars, and Gibson custom shops in particular, and of those, the 59 in particular, they hold their value tremendously well. So you have more confidence you can get out close to what you put in. But like I said, there's more ways to look at it than just the sticker price rather. And one of those is, how many guitars do I normally buy? Do I keep them? Do I want them all around? How much did that cost me? So a lot of players will spend as much or more on having multiple guitars that maybe don't get used and they sit around. So I think it's a better use of money to put it into a guitar that you love, you bond with, it stays forever, than to have half a dozen guitars that you don't feel very strongly about. They sit there gathering dust. Every now and then they'll get picked up. So I see, for a lot of people watching this, a lot of guitar players, you're spending the money anyway, just on multiple things. And now, of course, for some people, that is that's better value, right? To have 6 to 10, 12 things instead of one. Sure, I get that. For me personally, I started to see the detriment of that. I got so sick of walking into a room and there being guitars propped in that corner, and there's cases here and there, and then just seeing them think, actually, that one's not been played in a long time. How am I justifying keeping that? Or I pick it up and play it, and it doesn't feel great because the strings have got dust even been on the wall and things, and then you can leave them in cases, but then you don't play them as much because they're in cases. So for me, having 14 guitars, I started to see the downsides to it, and I wanted one kind of exemplary guitar, and that's what this is. So can you justify on the basis that it makes you a better player? I said yes and no. It doesn't make me a better player. Any limitations I have are still there. Any gaps in my knowledge are still there. But it makes me sound better. It's easier to play. It's more enjoyable to play, and it will make me play more and learn more. And also, actually, on that point, having a guitar that costs more money, I find it motivational because it makes me want to become good enough to kind of do it justice. You know what I mean? It spurs me on to be a better player. But you don't need them to make money as a musician. You don't need one to be a professional. You don't need one for credibility. You don't need one for people to take you seriously. You don't need one to get good tones. You don't need one to get a nice playing guitar. They are firmly in the luxury camp. Can you feel where the money's gone? Yes. Do I pick this guitar up and immediately know, wow, that feels like a premium instrument? Yes. Do I pick it up and am able to kind of admire the craftsmanship that's went into it? Yes. Is the quality control better? Yes. Although some people would say that that's not true of other brands, and fair enough. But I look at it and it's perfect. There's not one problem with it. Out of the box, or in my case off the wall, it doesn't need anything doing to it. There's not stray dye. There's not the intonation's right, the action's right. There's not anything wrong with it. And if, like I said, it's nice and light, you can feel that. In a Les Paul, that's the first thing you notice if it feels different. So this video's gone on a lot longer than I expected it to, and a lot of it's been me talking rather than playing. And I apologise to anyone who hasn't enjoyed that aspect, but I think that's probably important, because I think if we're being honest with ourselves as guitar players, one of my favourite channels on here is Paul David's, and he's got a great video, and he's got 3 million plus subscribers, so he's a lot of people's favourite channel on here, rightly so. But he's got a video where he compared a real genuine, I think it was a 1964 Strat, a modern custom shop reissue of a 64 Strat. I think there was a normal USA Strat and there was a Squire in there. And the video was how do they sound and feel differently. And obviously on video you can't hear as much as he's got in the room. But someone left a comment on that video that said they all sound the same to me. And Paul Davids gave possibly the most honest comment from a guitar player about guitar. And that is, he said, and I'm paraphrasing, excuse me if I get bits of it wrong. He said, generally speaking, guitars all sound broadly the same. And, well, guitars all sound similar, they sound like guitars. And Strats will sound even more similar. So what we're kind of dialing into the minutiae, the real small differences that, you know, and especially when you get yourself into a band mix, you know, I can sit here and dial in the most amazing tone in the world, but then you go and stand with a band and there might be another guitar player and there's drums and there's bass and you've got the acoustics of the room affecting everything, that you're not hearing your pure tone at that point. So I totally understand any guitar player that says, I'll use an overdrive pedal and an amp and a cheaper guitar. I get that. So really what we're looking here are the small things, and it really comes back to, you know, the audience isn't picking up on that for the most part. Not even because I'm not accusing any audience of being like ignorant to it. I think by the time you've got all that sound and the dynamics of the room and the noise of being in the audience as well, it's subtle enough that they're not really telling the difference. So it's really for you, the player. Can you hear the subtle differences? Can you feel the differences? Does it, you know, I firmly believe if you've got guitar in your hands that puts a smile on your face, just gives you 1% extra happiness and energy, that comes through in your playing and the performance that you have, and maybe what you're inspired to play. I can tell you that the night I bought this home, I changed the strings, I tuned it up, and I just started playing different. So like I said, my limitations are still there, my capabilities are still there, nothing there was different. But I was playing different melodies, I was playing different finger patterns, I can't explain it. It was just so nice to play, and once I warmed up, it brought something different from me, which I find too. You know, you pick up a Strat, you pick up a Les Paul. For me personally, they make me play slightly differently. I want to play different things on them. And evidently for me, it's the same having a nicer guitar. It makes me do something slightly different. But really, you know, what I'm trying to say is don't kid yourselves that it's for anyone other than you and your enjoyment. And that's why I found myself talking more in this video rather than playing, because certainly by the time YouTube's compressed this video, you're not going to hear the same thing I'm hearing, and equally you're not looking out for the same things I'm looking out for. The tone, or the main tone for one thing, and then the nuances in tone, the subtleties in tone from turning the knob a bit here and there, I will hear more than you will, it being in the room, than you will watching it on computer. And what sounds good to the thing I'm looking out for might not be what you're looking out for. So I bought this for me, and everyone would buy it for themselves too. So it's turned into a talky video, but I think that's, you know, what I'm trying to say is don't kid yourselves that it's for anyone other than you and your enjoyment. And that's why I found myself talking more in this video rather than playing, because certainly by the time YouTube's compressed this video, you're not going to hear the same things I'm looking out for. The honest in the sense, I think if I sat here and did a playthrough demonstration and tried to say you can really hear the difference after compression, after it's been uploaded, after you listen to it on speakers and headphones that I've got no control over, probably isn't true. And it comes back to what Paul David said, on that video, he put a real 1964 Fender Strat, which cost thousands and thousands of dollars, and he put it back to back with a Squier Strat. And there were differences, don't get me wrong. But if you put a blindfold on and watch that video, I think most people couldn't tell. I think it's one of those things you can tell the difference when you see the guitar swap. Oh yeah, that one's got this and that. Now in the room, I'm sure it's much more noticeable, of course. So for me to do this video, and especially with just a cheap amp like a Boss Katana, if I did it as a blind test and played a different guitar, there would be differences, but there would be massive differences. So again, what's important for you? What you're looking for? For me, I think I'm looking for, as I said, the nicest version of a Les Paul I can find, which makes me want to play it more. Makes me want to improve. It specifically makes me want to improve as a player to justify having it, to kind of do it proud kind of thing. I don't want to have a guitar that costs so much money for me just to play like nursery rhymes on it. But you don't necessarily get what you pay for, but you pay for what you get. I do think that's an accurate way of saying it. In that Gibson makes these higher end guitars. If you want them, this is what they cost. That's it. That said, look used. Over the years, a custom shop guitar made in 2023 will have differences to one made in 2011. My R8 is 2011. Which, now you have to remember, a lot of it with the custom shop, with the reissue models, is just about historical accuracy. Point is, year on year, there are some differences. There are some differences with the truss rod and the glue. This uses hide glue. Again, it's more accurate to the time. Some people say that it crystallizes and helps with the resonance. Some people say that's a load of nonsense. I haven't got an opinion. So what I'm trying to say is, unless you specifically want the most historically accurate version, in which case you need the most modern one, although 2022 isn't that long ago, look on the used market. My PRS was secondhand, my R8 was secondhand, my Strat was secondhand. Let someone else pay that full price and take potential depreciation. You can get a good bargain. So I'm going to wrap it up here. So the long and short of it, is it worth it? Is a very personal question. Is a personal question. For me, the answer is yes. For me, yes. You can 100% tell the difference. It's 100% a better guitar. It has the nicest top I've ever seen. Oh, well, yeah, the reissues do. But they're a luxury item, and it sounds great. And I'll keep this guitar forever, and this guitar will stop me buying a number of other guitars. I'm not saying I'll never buy another guitar, but it will stop me buying a number of guitars, which I think is important to consider when weighing up the price. So anyway, I hope you've enjoyed this video. I hope you've enjoyed my monologue, and I hope you enjoyed the small amount of playing that you heard and the sounds that you heard. And I'll be very curious to hear from anyone else who's played a reissue or custom shop or bought one, or who bought one and sold one because they didn't think it was actually any better than what they already had, or anyone who thinks you shouldn't spend more than $300, $400, $500 on a guitar because that's all they're worth. I'm curious to hear people's thoughts on this. I know it's incredibly personal and divisive, so that's all.